So welcome everyone to today's customer drop-in. Today we're talking about process workshop tips and tricks. I have to admit, this is a session I love doing. I love workshops. I've spent countless hours running workshops. It's kind of it's the thing I wish I could do more of, but obviously as your role changes and the like, but there's nothing like going back and running a load of workshops, facilitating those sessions. I've done this drop-in again, not countless times, but a number of times over the years, and I always go back to my previous notes, and I always tend to reimagine it. And it's just because it's such a big topic, and for different sessions, you will focus on different things. We could spend a long time talking about this and all the tips and tricks and all the the approaches that you want to take. But today, I'm going to ask you a quick question in a second. You can see up on the screen, and then I'm going to look at what I'm just saying here is the cheat code. So what we'll focus a lot on today. It won't be anything new if you've been in and around Spark for any length of time, but it's always good to have a refresher on that. I'll share some of my top tips and tricks. We've got other Spark people, other process people on the call, so I'm expecting they'll dip in as well. And this is a time, this is a community session, so please do put your lessons in there, put your top tips in there. I've got a lot of experience doing this, but that does not mean I'm right and know everything. So please do have some input. So first question then is who likes facilitating process workshops? Hands, comments, chat. Anyone want to? Yeah, Colin, unsurprisingly. Jenna, perfect. But don't be shy. I'm sure you've all got reasons. Actually, what I'm getting at here is, for those that haven't answered or maybe don't enjoy running workshops, digging into that a little bit. And actually the inverse, why don't people like looking forward or don't look forward to running workshops? And often it's because it can be a bit scary. Yeah. And actually you think I'm going to sit in a room full of people, and there'll be a few reasons like I said, that they're scary, or you're frightened. What happens if someone says this process is too complex? Well, we do it a million different ways. You're never going to map this. So I've spoken to a lot of BAs over the years where there's a little bit of an anxiety to get ready for a workshop. What if? We all kind of have those sorts of moments. But things like as a facilitator, do you need to know the process and so what I'm just doing here is setting the scene to show you the cheat code. Yeah, it's like what I do, what Colin does, any other team does. It's not complicated in what we do, but we've learned over the years. Yeah, and we've got a really, really powerful cheat code the top tip for running a workshop. You follow this structure and it will help you out. So without further ado, if I click down into here, I want to talk to you about the 5 steps. Sometimes you'll hear I say the 5 steps to the perfect process, but it really is, and you'll see the picture here. Hopefully everyone's been bowling. These are really the guardrails. Yeah, these are, if you think you're going off course, just stick to these, and it will start, and it will at least hit a few pins down at the end. So the 5 steps to the perfect process are defining your scope. Yeah. So what is the bucket that we're looking at today? Putting the activities in, then the outputs, then the flow, and then everything else. And this has saved me time and time again doing this approach. It's a really, really powerful approach when you're looking at running a process workshop. So what I thought we'd do is let's go through each one of these steps. We can talk around it as we go through, and we'll create a process. Yeah, bit of a cheat in terms of I have created something which we can talk through, but just to show you in action. And it doesn't matter what process you're mapping. This is a really, really powerful way to get that knowledge out of people's heads. Is everyone familiar with the 5 steps? Do you practice this in your own process workshops? Okay, Colin's nodding. Yeah. Well, it is the overarching top tip, basically. So let's run through and see how it builds. So in terms of setting the scope, it's the simplest in terms of the amount of content you're creating, but it often is one of the most powerful or important steps to do. Not just because it's the first. So when we're looking at the scope, we're talking about the title. Yeah, I'm less worried about the title. That can change and often does change, but it's a good starter for 10. But it's really the input, the first input in a process and the final output in a process. Yeah. And I've been in workshops where this takes 30 seconds. Yeah, maybe because you've done a bit of prep or you're using an existing process to start off with. I've been in other workshops where it can take 10 minutes just to argue what the end of the scope, end of the process is. It doesn't really matter, but you've got to put something on that screen to define where do we stop mapping, or where do we map up to. So it's really cool. And yeah, I'm showing you a simple option here. There might be more than one. Yeah, you don't want to put a million on. Yeah. You know, max I'd suggest is 2 or 3, but if you can get down to that scope, that's a really, really powerful bit. So only once you've done that, do you want to start talking about the activity boxes. I really do just mean the activity boxes. So just to show you here, we're not going to go and recreate these one by one. I'm going to go into edit mode, so we'll play around with them slightly, but it's just putting them up. So they don't have to come in any order. Yeah, so create new expense form, submit expenses, pay expenses, all these things you'd expect in here. And also at this point as well, you might want to, you might be being thrown process activity steps that you know are a lower level. The advice is here, chuck them up. Yeah, you don't want to stop people talking or switching off because you're cherry picking which activities you want in there. Chuck them up. Yeah, and what you'll quickly do, as you'll see here, you know, add an update line item, attach upload evidence, confirm line item. I know, you know, it becomes obvious as you're talking about them that they're all part of this step here. So even at this stage, as part of the activity step, I'd group it. Yeah, so you can quickly highlight these activity boxes, hit Control X for cut. This is the way I do it anyway. Control V, and then you park them. You put them there. Yeah. So one of the big tips is map one level at a time. So come back, you know, and crack on and finish this level. And you're asking, okay, are these the steps? Is this a good starter? And again, it doesn't matter if you've got one more than you need or one less than you need. This is it. So you notice I've not put who does it. Yeah, I might put a few notes in maybe just as that information is captured, but we are focusing on what are the activities that get us from A to B, we think, in this step. Okay. Then we look at the outputs. And I do love this step. So we'll come in here. Again, I've just pre-populated. You'll see what we're doing in here. So create a new expense form. What do we get? You know, the form saved to the desktop. Yeah, not a great process, but that's the as is. Yeah, and again, don't worry about mapping the perfect process at this point. You're mapping the process as it is because that's what you want. You want to understand what the process is doing. You know, why do we update expense line items? We do that until we've got no more expenses for this month. That's all you're doing. So you notice on the outputs, you know, we're not trying to do just the, you know, expenses are submitted. Yeah, actually, we're looking at the activity box and the output in its entirety to give us that bit of more information. Yeah, so review expenses. Why do we do that? So we've got a sample that's confirmed. It gives me, you know, that meets policy. It's giving me that extra bit of information. And then, you know, we've got this one here, little one left to do. We can then, you know, and even if it's obvious, yeah, you're facilitating the session. You say to the SMEs, say to the participants, right? So does paying expenses, is that the final output of our process? If it is, brilliant, hook it up. If it's not, maybe we need another activity. So you see what we're doing at each point is we're validating the process. And that's what's really, really powerful. And it will look messy until we start to look at the flow, which is the next step. If I come back up here, we looked at the outputs. If I look at the flow, we've got the similar sort of things we went there. In fact, I just didn't do that, did I? And then you're talking through, you're walking people through. So once an employee has incurred an expense, what do I do? This is a bit pretty laid out, but you know, it's pretty obvious. But we can say, right, we need to create a new expense form. Brilliant. I'm not worrying about lining it up. Once we've got that saved to our desktop, what do we do? Oh, we add line items. Once there are no more expenses, what do? You know, we submit expenses. Again, don't worry about how it's laid out. You can change that. You know, and then what do we do? Once the expenses sent to line manager, what do we do? Is that review expenses? No, it's approve expenses. Brilliant. Yeah, and we can come out on here. You'll notice actually one point I failed to mention is we try and assume it works. That's one of the top tips. But there would always be reasons why you might want to put the exception output on there as well, even at that early stage. And approvals is a great example of that. You know, actually, it's either going to meet the policy or there's an issue with it. So, you know, quite often you'd put those on there as that. And then we can say once it's met policy, what do we do? Do we pay it? Actually, no. Control Z to undo that. I was getting a bit too keen. We review the process expenses and we do that. So again, quite quickly you're doing it, and then you can say, well, what happens when we have an issue? We come back up here. Again, I'm not worried about the flow at the moment. Brilliant. And you can line up at this point, and I am put OCD on that, but you can use all the shortcut keys in here. Again, another top tip: get familiar with the shortcut keys. You don't have to do that in the workshop, but again, if you've got a quick break, it's no harm in getting these things set up. So we've got a pretty cool process, yeah. We've got the inputs, outputs, verb and noun activities. It's got some sort of flow on, and then we can start to enrich it. We can start to put everything else on there. So again, just to be blatantly obvious, we've very rarely are we putting roles or systems against these activity boxes, unless it's like an exception or you want to tag it earlier on, because we want to look at the flow, and then we can look at who does it. And so you can, as I said, each step you've got some sort of validation. So then we can look at everything else. So we can start to put, one I tidied up earlier, but we can start to put attachments on here. Videos, links, requirements, whatever it might be. We can look at the roles. We can look at the systems, and then top tip: map one level at a time. Then we can start to look at the detailed views. Yeah, and the real power of that is the inputs, the outputs. And again, this is just one we made earlier, but you'd go through exactly the same process as before. The only difference is you do not have to worry about scope because that's been set. Yeah, that's brilliant. So honestly, the 5 steps to the perfect process is that handrail. It's those bumpers on the side of the bowling alley, which will get you out of trouble a lot of times. So if I come back up, we looked at the cheat code again. We know it off by heart. We've done it a million times, but we've got you can have printouts, you can have little crib sheets. Really good to have. In terms of my top tips and tricks, I've touched on a couple of these already. Map one level at a time. I've rarely have I been drawn down into the trap of looking at detail before we've done that higher level, and then almost every time I've done that, it's taken longer. Actually, because what it's doing is it's framing the conversations for the lower details. By all means, jump around. If you're looking at a level, and someone mentions something which is is further down, then put that little placeholder in. But mapping one level at a time is such a lifesaver. It keeps things simple, keeps the conversations very focused. The assume it works is an interesting one. You sometimes hear people say mapping the happy flow, and you might get a little bit of a laugh from people when you sort of suggest that's what you're doing. But again, it helps you get something on the page, which you can then look at what happens if things go wrong. In my experience, if you start looking at all the bad things and all the exceptions and all the negative kind of paths, it very quickly spirals. And you end up with a very front-heavy process because you don't get time to go and look at everything else. Get that framework in, and then start to drill down, and then look at the issue it doesn't work. The unhappy flow. And it's a bit of a similar top tip here of pick one scenario. The amount of times I've had people say to me, we're never going to map this because we do it 100 different ways. Or we've got 12 different sites and they all work differently. How are we ever going to get this started? Just honestly, just pick one. And 9 times out of 10, what will happen is you'll realize these variations are just nuances. They're different fields in a checkbox or a slightly different sequence of steps. And actually, you need that first version down so you can understand how is it different, or even if it is different. When people say 100 different ways, what typically happens is they've got 3 or 4 different flavors of it, which will cover the majority of that. This one gets a little bit of a laugh sometimes, or a bit of a raised eyebrow, but silence is acceptance. Tell people this. You're here, and it kind of goes a bit in hand with everyone has a voice. I should have moved these around actually to be a bit more in line. But yeah, so people are there to agree a process. It's not a warm up. We were in there to map the process, and so try and get people to speak. And if you've got, it doesn't mean you have to answer every question in the workshop. You can always have a parking lot, and you might have to go and get pre-approval or authorization for a decision. But telling people if you're not, speak now, because we do need your input. And it sort of goes in line with everyone has a voice. Just because the loudest person is talking all the time, really the top tip is to make sure people have a voice. Make time for people, make space for people. Otherwise it can get quite myopic in terms of just getting one person's view in a process, and you won't get great output. You won't get that engagement. You won't get that buy-in. These two at the bottom, they're my favorite tips. Whenever I do this, drop in these don't change. But the top tip is just get started. Yeah, it really is. You can start with a template process. You can start with a blank page, but just learn those questions to ask to get people to get comfortable with you and to start talking. A great question if you're getting blank faces, just ask people, what do they like about today's process? Ask them that, and then as soon as you get them talking, you'll start to pick out where there's areas of improvement, or just pick out the process. Get people to talk. Remember those activity boxes are verb and nouns, so every time you hear that construct, that verb and noun construct, just chuck an activity box on. People start to see what you're doing. They'll start to learn the process of the workshop, and it will snowball from there. And then the last one from me, but I am going to ask you to put your top tips in or contribute, is the don't try and map perfect processes. You'll send yourself crazy, or you'll get blank faces. Just put it up there. If you've got 5 people that are all part of that step or responsible for that step, put it up there. It's all about capturing the process, because then you can do something with it. So don't wait for perfection. Don't wait. Oh, we can't run the workshop because we don't know what we do. We don't know what the process is. But let's go and do some research before we do the workshop. It's like, no, just get in there, get started, put stuff out there, and don't worry about it if it's not perfect in the first iteration.